My name is Aisha, and I want to tell you about my journey, how I learned to speak English with confidence. I didn't grow up speaking English, but I found simple and smart ways to become better at it. Today, I'll share with you the best tips that truly worked for me. I started listening like a child learns. When I first moved to the US, everything felt new, loud, and strange. People spoke so fast, their words blended into each other, and I often wondered, was that even English? I remember walking through the grocery store with a small notepad in my purse. I'd write down words I overheard, words like checkout, receipt, clearance, and aisle. I didn't know how to say them out loud, but I tried to guess what they meant. In the beginning, I felt like I was standing outside of a party with the door closed. I could hear laughter, music, and voices, but I couldn't understand the words. I didn't want to feel that way forever. I didn't want to feel invisible in a world full of people. So I made a decision. I would learn English not like a student, but like a baby. Babies don't start by speaking. They listen. They listen to their parents, their siblings, the sounds around them, and slowly they begin to copy. I wanted to copy that same process. I started by watching children's cartoons and simple shows. I picked ones with bright colors and clear voices. One of the first shows I watched was a little animation where a boy talks to his dog. They would say things like, "Let's go to the park," and "I'm hungry. Let's eat." At first, I didn't understand all the words, but the pictures helped. I could see what was happening and match it with the sounds. I didn't just watch once and move on. No, I watched the same episode again and again. The first time, I just watched. The second time, I tried to listen for words I remembered. The third time, I repeated the phrases out loud like I was the character. Over time, those simple sentences stuck in my mind. I began to say them while cooking or cleaning. "Let's go. I'm tired. That's funny." It felt silly at first, like I was pretending, but that was the point. I was training my brain and ears. I also started watching YouTube channels made for people learning English. Some of them had slow speaking practice. Others showed daily conversations in coffee shops, bus stops, or doctor's offices. I would sit on my bed, press play, and listen with full attention. I didn't take notes, and I didn't stop the video every time I didn't understand. I just listened. I let the words wash over me like music in the background. The amazing thing is this: even when I didn't try to memorize anything, my brain was doing the work for me. I would hear the word appointment 10 times in 1 week, and suddenly, I knew what it meant. I didn't need a dictionary. I didn't need to translate. I just knew. I took this habit into real life, too. I stopped using my phone while waiting in line. Instead, I listened. At the coffee shop, I'd listen to how people ordered. They said things like, "Can I get a medium latte with oat milk?" Or, "I'll have a muffin to go." I repeated those phrases in my head. Sometimes, I whispered them softly just to practice the rhythm. In the library, I watched how people spoke to the staff. "Do you have any books about travel? Can I renew this?" These were real words from real people in real places. I didn't need a classroom. The whole city became my teacher. Soon I noticed something exciting. I was starting to expect words. I could guess what someone was going to say before they finished the sentence. My ears were getting smarter. I no longer felt lost during group conversations. I might not have understood every single word, but I understood enough to follow the idea. That gave me a new kind of confidence. I stopped worrying about perfect English. I started focusing on real English, the kind that helps you live, laugh, and connect. I didn't need fancy grammar or big words. I needed connection, and listening gave me that. One memory I'll never forget happened at the laundromat. A woman beside me was talking to her son. She said, "Don't forget to fold your clothes." And the boy laughed and said, "You always say that." I smiled without even thinking. That small moment felt big to me because I understood it all. It wasn't a textbook sentence. It wasn't slow or perfect, but I understood. And I realized I was no longer outside that party. The door was opening. But understanding wasn't enough. I wanted to join the conversation. Listening had helped my brain, but now it was time to help my mouth. I needed to speak. I needed to hear my own voice saying the things I had been hearing from others. So I made a promise to myself. I said, "Tomorrow I will start speaking, even if it's just to myself. Even if I make mistakes, I will speak." And that's exactly what I did. I spoke small sentences to myself every day. The night before, I began speaking English aloud to myself. I sat on my bed and thought about everything I had heard that day. The woman at the laundromat, the boy teasing her, the quiet hum of conversations in the cafe, even the announcements on the bus. I had understood so much just by listening. That gave me hope. But understanding wasn't enough. I wanted to speak. I wanted the words I'd heard 100 times to come from my own mouth. I remember staring at myself in the mirror. I whispered, "Let's go to the store." It was quiet, shaky. My lips moved slowly, and I watched them carefully. Then I said it again, a little louder this time. "Let's go to the store." The words felt strange, like trying on new shoes that didn't quite fit yet, but something inside me said, "Keep going, Aisha." That first morning, I turned my whole day into small sentences. It started in the kitchen. I opened the fridge and said, "I need eggs." I turned on the stove and said, "I'm cooking breakfast." I laughed at how odd it felt, like I was in a cooking show with no audience, but I didn't stop. As I ate my eggs, I said, "These are good." When I dropped my fork, I said, "Oops, that was loud." I was talking to myself like a child who had just learned how. And in a way, I had. I realized something powerful that day. When I spoke, even just to myself, I was no longer a silent observer. I was part of the language. Each sentence I said was a small victory. It didn't matter that no one heard it. I heard it, and that mattered most. The next day, I added more. As I brushed my teeth, I said, "Brush up, brush down." Almost done. I looked at my sleepy face in the mirror and said, "You can do this." Those tiny phrases became my practice ground. I didn't try to make perfect sentences. I just said what I was doing, feeling, seeing. When I left the apartment, I said, "Keys, phone, purse, ready." I caught the bus and whispered, "The bus is late." I looked at the sky and said, "It's cloudy today." It was like building a bridge one word at a time. Every step, every thought had a sentence to go with it. I didn't always feel brave. Sometimes I thought, what if someone hears me? What if I sound silly? But then I remembered something I had seen in one of the English videos. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present. That stayed with me. So I kept going. I made it a game. I picked 3 objects each day and said something about them. The chair is brown. The window is open. My shoes are old. These were not deep sentences, but they were mine. After a few weeks, something amazing started to happen. I wasn't just saying random sentences anymore. I was starting to think in English. It happened slowly, without force. I'd look at a cup and instead of thinking taza, I thought cup. I'd see a door and think open the door. The voice in my head was changing languages. It surprised me the first time I caught myself doing it. I was walking through a park, and I thought, that dog is fast. I stopped. I smiled. I said it out loud, that dog is fast. And it felt easy. Speaking to myself became a part of my life. It helped me feel less alone during long days, and slowly it prepared me for real conversations. One afternoon, I was walking past a bakery when a lady asked me, "Do you know where the library is?" My heart jumped. I opened my mouth, and the words came out almost by themselves. "Yes, it's across the street next to the post office." She smiled, said thank you, and walked away. I stood there stunned. I just answered someone in English without planning, without fear. All those small sentences I had whispered in private gave me that moment. They had built a strong foundation. Like tiny bricks forming a wall, each phrase added to my courage. That day, I went home with a new goal. I said to myself, now it's time to practice longer sentences. And I did. I started describing more. Instead of saying, "The sky is blue," I said, "The sky is blue today, and it makes me feel happy." I wasn't just speaking facts, I was speaking feelings. I said, "I miss my family. I hope I get better at this. I'm proud of myself." Those were real thoughts, and I gave them a voice. Sometimes I made mistakes. I said the wrong verb. I used the wrong word. But it didn't matter. I corrected myself kindly. I said, "Oops," not go. Went. I went to the store. In time, I created a little habit. At the end of each day, I would sit on my bed and talk to myself for 2 minutes. I'd tell myself what happened that day. Today was busy. I worked a lot. I saw a funny dog in the street. I felt tired in the afternoon. But now I feel okay. This bedtime routine felt like talking to a friend. It helped me review the day and see my progress. And the more I did it, the easier it became. Sometimes I recorded myself on my phone. I would talk about my day and then listen to it later. Hearing my own voice in English was strange at first, but helpful. I noticed the words I said clearly and the ones I stumbled on. One day, While listening to my own recording, I heard myself say, "I bought apples at the store, and the cashier smiled at me." My voice sounded calm. My English was natural. I wasn't translating, I was speaking. That's when I realized something beautiful. I wasn't waiting for the perfect moment to speak English anymore. I was creating those moments every single day just by talking to myself. And this habit changed me. It gave me the strength to start practicing with other people. At first, I still felt nervous, but I knew I had the words inside me. They just needed a chance to come out. So I made another promise to myself. I said, "Tomorrow, I will try to practice English with someone else. Just one sentence, just one try." Because after speaking to myself for so long, I knew I was ready for the next step. I practiced with my phone like it was a real person. That night, after I made a promise to speak with someone in real life, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about it. What if I forget the words? What if they don't understand me? What if I freeze? The fear was real, but something stronger had grown inside me. Desire. A real deep desire to speak English, not just to myself anymore, but to others. Still, I needed to take one more step before talking to people. I sat on my bed the next morning, holding my phone in both hands. It was quiet in my apartment, and I felt a little silly. But I remembered something I saw once in a video where someone said, "If you're too scared to speak with people, start by speaking to your phone. Pretend it's your friend." That stuck with me. So I opened the camera, switched it to video mode, and pressed record. I stared at the screen. My own face looked back at me. It felt strange at first, but then I smiled and said, "Hello, Aisha. How are you today?" Just that small sentence made me blush. I laughed, but I didn't stop. I answered myself, "I'm good today. I had eggs and toast for breakfast. I slept okay and I want to practice English." I paused the video and played it back. I listened closely. My voice sounded a little shy, a little unsure, but it was mine, and it was in English. That made me proud, so I decided to do it again. I hit record and said more this time. I talked about the weather. It's cloudy outside. I think it will rain. I forgot my umbrella today, but maybe I won't need it. Then I imagined someone replying to me. I made up the answers and kept the conversation going. I said, "Oh, really? You like rainy days?" Then I'd smile and say, "Me too. It's peaceful." It was like acting out a play where I played both parts. It felt silly at first, but it worked. I was practicing real conversations. I was imagining the questions and thinking of answers. I wasn't reading from a book. I was thinking, feeling, speaking. Every day, I sat down with my phone and made little video chats. I would talk about my day. I'd say, "Today, I went to the park. I saw kids playing with a red ball. I sat on a bench and watched them. It made me smile." Then I'd pretend my phone asked, "Did you talk to anyone?" And I would say, "No, not yet, but maybe tomorrow I will. I'm practicing." Each time I did this, I felt my confidence grow. I started adding more emotion to my words. I would smile when I said something happy, I'd frown when I talked about something sad. I was learning how to use tone, not just words. Sometimes I even practiced arguments or funny conversations. I'd say, "No, I don't think pineapple belongs on pizza." Then I'd laugh and pretend someone said, "Why not?" And I'd reply, "Because it's too sweet. Pizza is not a dessert." It was fun, and it kept me going. After a few weeks, I didn't need to think so hard. The words came faster, the pauses were shorter, my sentences became longer, and the most beautiful part, I was no longer scared of my own voice. One evening, I watched one of my early recordings. I saw a shy girl whispering short phrases. Then I watched my most recent video. I was smiling, speaking clearly, and using full sentences. I said things like, "Today I saw a woman walking 5 dogs at once. It was funny. One of the dogs stopped to sniff everything, and the others pulled her forward." I laughed at myself. I sounded like someone telling a story to a friend. That's when I realized my phone had become my practice partner. No judgment, no pressure, just me and my voice growing stronger every day. Sometimes I even used the voice recorder app instead of the video. I would close my eyes and just speak. I described everything around me. I'm sitting on my couch. The blanket is soft. I can hear birds outside. It made me more aware of my surroundings and helped me find the right words. Other times, I would pretend I was making a phone call. I'd hold the phone to my ear and say things like, "Hi, it's Aisha. How are you?" I would imagine the other person answering and I'd reply, "I'm doing great. Thanks. I just wanted to say hello and ask how your day is going." I repeated these fake phone calls often. Each time I tried different topics. Sometimes I talked about shopping. I went to the store and they had a sale on oranges. Other times I talked about plans. "I'm thinking about going to the movies this weekend." All these small role plays helped me feel less nervous about real conversations. One morning, while I was recording a pretend phone call, my neighbor knocked on the door. I quickly stopped the recording and opened it. She asked if I had any extra batteries for her flashlight. I froze for a second, then said, "Yes, I think I do. Let me check." I found the batteries and gave them to her. She smiled and said, "Thanks, Aisha. You're always so helpful." And before I could stop myself, I replied, "No problem at all. I'm happy to help." She left, and I stood there smiling. That was a real conversation, and I didn't panic. All that practice with my phone had prepared me for moments like this. I felt strong. Later that day, I picked up my phone again. I pressed record and said, "Today I spoke to my neighbor. It was a short talk, but I did it. I'm proud of myself." And I meant every word. As time passed, I started using different voices. I'd speak slowly one day, then faster the next. I practiced different moods: happy, sad, tired, excited. It helped me sound more natural. I also started reading aloud from books and recording it. I would pause after each sentence and explain what it meant, like I was teaching someone. It helped me understand the language better and made me feel like a teacher. One day, I watched a video of myself from a month ago and compared it to a new one. The difference was clear. I had better rhythm. My words flowed. My face was more relaxed. My eyes were brighter. and my fear was gone. That's when I said to myself, now it's time. I think I'm ready to talk to someone real, not just my phone, because I knew the words. I had practiced them. I had heard myself say them again and again, and my phone had been my quiet, patient friend through it all. I smiled as I put my phone down. It had helped me grow, but now I was ready to step outside this safe little world. It was time to speak to a real person with real ears, a real voice, and real questions. And that moment became the beginning of something new. I made mistakes, but I kept talking. The morning I decided to speak with a real person, my heart was both excited and scared. I had been preparing for this moment for weeks. All those times talking to myself, all the pretend phone calls, all the sentences I whispered into my phone while lying in bed at night, it had all led to this. But now, standing in front of my mirror, practicing how to say, "Hi, how are you?" Out loud, I realized that practice is never quite the same as the real thing. Still, I knew I had to do it. I couldn't hide behind my phone forever. I had come too far to stop now. There was a little bakery just 2 blocks from my apartment. I had walked past it many times. The lady who worked there always smiled, and I remembered once she complimented my scarf. That day, I decided it would be the perfect place to try. I could buy a muffin and maybe say something more than just thank you. As I walked down the sidewalk, I kept repeating my lines. "Hi, I'd like a blueberry muffin, please." I said it over and over in my head, just like a song. When I pushed the door open, the bell above it chimed. The sweet smell of bread and cinnamon filled the room. My heart pounded in my chest. I stepped up to the counter. The woman smiled, just like she always did, and said, "Good morning. What can I get for you?" I opened my mouth and said, "Hi, I would like a a blueberry muffin, please." My face turned hot. She smiled kindly and said, "Blueberry muffin? Sure thing. 1 or 2?" "1," I said quickly. "Would you like coffee with that?" "No, yes. Coffee? Yes, please." She nodded and began to prepare my order. I stood there frozen, my hands sweating. I had mixed up my words. I said, "blue muffin." That wasn't right. And I almost said no to the coffee before saying yes. I felt like my nerves were louder than my words. When she gave me my muffin and coffee, I thanked her and left as quickly as I could. Outside, I sat on a bench and took a deep breath. I had made mistakes, small ones, but they felt big at that moment. My pronunciation wasn't perfect. My words got jumbled. I had trouble answering a simple question. But still, I did it. I spoke. I didn't run away. I didn't stop talking. That was something to be proud of. After I finished my muffin, I opened the voice recorder on my phone and spoke softly. Today, I went to the bakery and ordered food. I made mistakes. I said, "blue muffin," and I got confused about the coffee. But I talked. I didn't stay silent. That's what matters. That became my new rule. Mistakes are part of the journey. If I waited to be perfect, I would never speak. But if I accepted my mistakes, I would keep growing. From that day on, I made it my mission to talk to one new person every day. Even if it was just a short sentence, even if I got nervous, even if I made mistakes. I talked to the mailman when I checked the mailbox. I said, "Hello, how's your day?" Once I even asked him, "Do you like your job?" He smiled and said, "Most days, yes, except when it rains." We both laughed. I talked to the cashier at the grocery store. "I like your earrings," I said one time. She replied, "Thanks." My sister made them. That led to a short chat about handmade jewelry. I didn't understand every word, but I nodded, smiled, and said, "Wow, that's cool." And yes, I kept making mistakes. Sometimes I used the wrong verb. Sometimes I forgot a word and had to point to what I meant. Once, I told a woman at the bus stop, "I am waiting the bus," and she gently corrected me, "Waiting for the bus?" I laughed and said, "Yes, thank you, waiting for the bus." The more I spoke, the more I realized people were kinder than I expected. No one laughed at me. No one made me feel stupid. In fact, most people smiled. Some even said, "Your English is really good." That made my day. But I knew they were just being kind. My English still had mistakes. My sentences weren't always smooth. My pronunciation wasn't perfect. But I didn't let that stop me anymore. Each time I made a mistake, I learned something new. Each time I spoke and got confused, I remembered the feeling and practiced it later. My little notebook became full of corrections. I would write down things like, "I am waiting for the bus." "I'd like some coffee, not a coffee." "How long have you lived here?" Not "How long are you living here?" Those mistakes became my teachers. I began to enjoy the process. I found beauty in imperfection. I wasn't chasing a perfect accent or flawless grammar anymore. I just wanted to connect. I wanted to be understood and to understand others. And slowly, that started to happen. One day at the park, a woman sitting on the next bench sneezed. I said, "Bless you." She smiled and said, "Thank you." Then, without thinking too much, I asked, "Do you come here a lot?" She said, "Yeah, I live nearby. I bring my dog here every morning." She pointed to a small brown dog sitting beside her. "He's cute," I said. She laughed and said, "Thanks." "His name is Peanut." I smiled. Peanut is a good name. We talked for 5 minutes. She spoke slowly, and I tried my best to answer. I made a few mistakes, like saying, "I have come here yesterday," instead of, "I came here yesterday." But she didn't mind. We just kept talking. When I left the park that day, I felt taller. Not because I stood straighter, but because I felt braver. I had spoken to someone for 5 full minutes. I had made mistakes, but I hadn't quit. There was one moment that really changed me. I was at a community meeting just to listen, but the organizer asked if anyone wanted to introduce themselves. My heart raced. I raised my hand. "Hi," I said slowly. "My name is Aisha. I live in the apartments near the school. I am learning English. So sorry if I say something wrong." A few people smiled and nodded. "I like reading books. I want to make friends and speak more English." When I finished, people clapped. Someone said, "You're doing great. Keep going." And I smiled the biggest smile of my life. That moment was not perfect. I spoke slowly. I paused. I searched for words, but it was real. It was honest, and I was proud. I began to see my mistakes as little marks of bravery. Each one showed I was trying. Each one proved I wasn't hiding anymore. One day, I even joked with a friend I met at the library. I said, "I make so many mistakes in English. I should write a book, How Not to Say Things." She laughed and said, "That's the best way to learn." I laughed too, because it was true. English wasn't about getting everything right. It was about keeping the conversation going, even when things got messy. That became my new goal. I told myself, don't aim for perfect, aim for connection. So, I kept talking, even when I mixed up he and she, even when I used the wrong tense, even when I forgot a word and had to use my hands to explain, even when someone said, "Sorry, what did you say?" And I had to try again. I didn't give up because I knew every word I spoke was another brick in the bridge I was building, a bridge between me and the world, and I was getting closer every day. I joined English conversations even when I was nervous. After those first small steps, talking to myself, using my phone, and even speaking with strangers, I felt like I was finally beginning to live in English. I was no longer hiding behind silence. Still, one big fear stayed with me: joining group conversations. It's one thing to speak one-on-one. It's another thing to speak in a group. People talk faster. They laugh at jokes you don't understand. They interrupt each other, use slang, and speak with accents. Just listening feels like running to catch a train that's already far ahead. I remember clearly the first time I tried. It was a Sunday afternoon. I had seen a flyer on the community board at the library. It said, "English Conversation Circle. Practice English in a fun group." It was happening in one of the library rooms just down the hall from the children's section. I stood in front of the door for 5 full minutes, staring at the sign taped to the glass. My feet wanted to turn and walk away. I told myself, "You're not ready." But another voice inside me whispered, "You'll never feel ready. Go anyway." I took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The room had a big round table and about 8 chairs. There were already 5 people sitting there. Some were flipping through handouts. Some were chatting. A kind woman stood near the front, organizing papers. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. "Hi there. Are you here for the conversation circle?" I nodded, my voice stuck in my throat. "Welcome. I'm Jane. Just grab a seat anywhere." I sat down quietly, my hands shaking just a little. One woman next to me smiled and said hello. I smiled back, but didn't say anything. I was listening to their words, their rhythm, their laughter. The leader, Jane, began the session. "Let's all introduce ourselves. Just your name, where you're from, and one thing you like to do." I panicked inside. Why do we always have to start this way? Everyone began to speak one by one. "My name is Jorge. I'm from Mexico, and I love cooking." "I'm Lynn from Taiwan. I like drawing." Then it was my turn. I felt my voice shake. "Hi, I'm Aisha. I'm from Florida, and I like reading books. My sentence was simple, but I said it out loud in front of everyone. That was a win. The group continued with a topic: food in our countries. Jane guided the conversation with questions like, "What's a popular dish in your home country?" Or, "Do you cook at home?" Some people answered confidently. Others, like me, gave short, careful answers. When it was my turn, I said, "In my family, we eat rice and beans a lot. It is normal food for us." Jane smiled and nodded. Comfort food? That's nice. I wasn't sure what comfort food meant, but I smiled back. That first session, I barely spoke 10 sentences. I listened more than I talked. Sometimes I didn't understand what someone said, but I tried to pick up words I knew. When people laughed, I smiled, even if I didn't get the joke. After the group ended, Jane handed out a paper that said, "Next week's topic, holidays around the world." I went home and started preparing. I read about how people describe holidays in English. I wrote little sentences like, "On Christmas, we eat dinner together. We light candles. It is a happy time with family." All week, I practiced those sentences. The next Sunday, I went back. This time, I wasn't as nervous. When Jane asked about holidays, I raised my hand. In my family, we celebrate with food. We cook big meals. My mom makes a special cake. I like this time because the house feels warm, happy. I paused, searching for words. Jane smiled. That's beautiful. I smiled too. Every week I kept going back. Every week I spoke a little more. And every week I was nervous, but I went anyway. That's what mattered. I learned to accept the nervous feeling. It didn't mean I was weak. It meant I was doing something brave. It meant I cared. It meant I was pushing myself. I started joining other small groups too. One day, a girl from the library circle invited me to a coffee shop meetup. "We meet every Saturday," she said. "Just a few of us. We talk about books, TV shows, whatever." The first time I went, I felt like I was back at the beginning again. Everyone was talking at once. They used phrases I didn't know, like, "That's a bummer," and "totally binge-watched it." I had no idea what binge-watched meant, but I kept listening. I kept smiling. I kept showing up. One time, someone said, "What's your favorite show, Aisha?" My heart jumped. I said, "I like crime shows, like people solving crimes." Someone asked, "Oh, like Law and Order?" I nodded. "Yes, I like when the detective finds the truth." That started a small conversation. Someone said, "You'd love Mindhunter." I didn't know what it was, but I made a note to look it up later. Little by little, I joined more. I said yes to invitations, even when I was nervous. I joined a volunteer group at the local park. Once a month, we cleaned up trash and planted flowers. People talked while working. They asked me questions like, "Where did you grow up?" Or, "Do you have family here?" At first, I answered simply, "I grew up in Miami. My parents live there." But later, I added more. "My dad has a garden. He grows mangoes. I miss the mangoes a lot." People laughed and said, "Fresh mangoes? You're lucky." I wasn't just speaking, I was connecting. I joined a Zoom book club that met online every other week. Sometimes I didn't understand the deeper meaning of the book, but I shared what I could. I would say, "This part made me feel sad," or "I liked the way the character changed." And again, I was nervous every single time. But I went anyway. I reminded myself that English wasn't something you finish learning. It was something you live in, something you grow into. The nerves never fully disappeared, but they got quieter. The more I joined conversations, the more I realized that confidence doesn't come first. Courage comes first. Confidence follows. There were still moments I made mistakes, like the time I said, "I am boring," instead of, "I am bored." Everyone laughed kindly, and someone said, "No, you're not boring." I laughed too. Or when I told someone, "I'm excited to meet your husband," but I accidentally said, "your husband," instead of, "your cousin." I felt embarrassed, but the woman was very sweet and said, "Well, you'll meet both of them." Instead of running from those moments, I began to see them as part of the experience. Joining conversations became a habit, a brave habit. I didn't always have something smart to say. Sometimes I listened more than I talked. Sometimes I repeated myself. Sometimes I paused for long seconds to find the right word. But I didn't quit. I showed up again and again, and that, more than anything, changed everything for me. Now, when I walk into a room where people are speaking English, I no longer feel like an outsider looking in. I feel like a part of the world, a world that once felt far away now feels like home. Because I kept showing up, even when I was nervous.